You know that feeling when your child is upset and you instinctively pause before reacting. Not because you don't care, but because something inside you wants to get it right. Not too soft, not too harsh, just steady. So you stand there for a second, measuring your tone, your face, your words as if the moment matters more than it seems to anyone else in the room. People often misread that pause. They call it distance. They call it guarded. Sometimes they even call it emotionally unavailable. But what they're seeing isn't a lack of feeling. It's a pattern, a learned rhythm. And patterns like that don't come from nowhere. There's something quietly specific about the psychology of Gen X parents that rarely gets explained correctly. Most conversations reduce it to stereotypes about independence or toughness. But there's more going on here than people realize, and it lives deeper than personality. It lives in wiring. Psychologists who study developmental environments often talk about something called adaptive calibration. It's the idea that a child's nervous system learns how the world works, then adjusts itself to match. Not consciously, biologically. Studies on stress regulation and attachment have shown that when children grow up in environments where emotional support is inconsistent, their brains don't stop needing connection. They simply learn to approach it carefully. The amygdala becomes more alert to emotional shifts. The prefrontal cortex becomes more practiced at monitoring reactions. Over time, this creates adults who feel deeply but reveal selectively. Translated into real life, it can look like this. You love your children fiercely, but you're careful with how that love shows up. You want them to be strong because strength once protected you. You want them to be self-reliant because you had to be. And when they struggle, something in your body remembers what it was like to handle things alone. So instead of rushing in emotionally, you steady yourself first. Not because you're detached, because your system learned that steadiness is safety. Many Gen X parents grew up during a cultural moment where independence wasn't just encouraged, it was expected. Latchkey afternoons, unsupervised problem solving, emotional experiences processed quietly, internally, without much translation from adults. A developing nervous system interprets that kind of environment in a very specific way. Closeness is meaningful, but self-reliance is essential. So it builds both. That combination becomes a survival strategy. And survival strategies tend to stick, even when survival is no longer at stake. What's important to understand is that this wiring isn't better or worse than anyone else's. It's simply one adaptation among many. Some people grow up learning that closeness is constant and expressive. Others grow up learning that care is quiet and practical. Neither is more correct. They're just different languages of love shaped by different early conditions. There's also a paradox hidden inside this pattern that most people never notice. The very traits that sometimes make Gen X parents seem emotionally reserved are often the same traits that make them extraordinarily dependable. When you've learned early in life that stability isn't guaranteed, you tend to become someone who provides it. You show love through reliability, through showing up, through solving problems, through making sure the lights stay on, the bills get paid, the plans hold together. You may not always narrate your feelings out loud, but you build environments where others can feel safe. Research in behavioral neuroscience suggests that people who developed heightened self-monitoring in childhood often become adults with strong emotional regulation. They're less likely to react impulsively, more likely to think before responding, more likely to absorb stress without immediately passing it on. That capacity isn't accidental. It's practiced, repeated thousands of times in small moments no one else saw. But every adaptation carries both a strength and a cost. The strength is resilience. The cost is that you sometimes forget you're allowed to need things too. Many Gen X parents became so skilled at holding steady for others that asking for comfort themselves can feel unfamiliar, even unnecessary. Not because the need isn't there, because the system learned long ago that needs should be managed internally first. Over time, that can create a quiet loneliness that's hard to name. Not dramatic, not obvious. Just a subtle sense that you're the one people rely on, rarely the one who leans. And here's the part that matters most. None of this means something is wrong with you. It means something happened to you, and your mind did exactly what minds are designed to do. It adapted in a way that preserved your ability to function, to care, to build, to continue. The traits you carry now are not random quirks. They're the living record of how you learn to exist in the world. Seen from that angle, your caution isn't coldness. Your independence isn't distance. Your emotional restraint isn't absence. They're forms of intelligence, protective ones, quiet ones, the kind that don't announce themselves but shape everything. And your children, whether they realize it yet or not, are growing up inside the shelter those adaptations built. There's a certain kind of relief that comes when you recognize yourself not as flawed, but as patterned. When the things you once questioned suddenly make sense in context. Because understanding doesn't change who you are. It changes how you hold who you are. If this feels familiar, if some part of you recognized itself in these words, there are more layers to this than we've uncovered here. And the deeper you look, the more coherent your story tends to become.